Hey everyone, this is Ramanuj and welcome to the episode 9 of our Spring Boot and Microservice tutorial series. Well, in our previous episode, we have explored the queries in Spring Data JPA. We have written different types of queries like native SQL queries or JPQL, and we have extracted the data from the table. In this video, we are going to implement one of the very important aspects of relational database, that is mapping or relationship. Now, when we are working with a relational database, we know a concept called normalization. And what is the purpose of normalization? To reduce the redundancy. Now, let's try to understand. If you look at my product table right now, this is my product entity. Let me bring this entity to this so that it would be easier for us to understand. Let's consider we have a product. And for product, we have an ID, we have a name, we have a quantity, we have a price, and also we have details. Okay. Now a product can also have suppliers. Now, what if we write all the details with respect to a supplier, like supplier ID, supplier name, then supplier might be having an email, and many more details. Now, if I save all the details within the product table, the problem is I have to repeat the same details again and again. Although for many products, there might be a single supplier, still I need to repeat the details of supplier with each product. And that is something that we don't want to do. And that's where we do something called normalization. So basically with normalization, we'll divide the tables into number of tables so that the redundancy can be reduced. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a separate table here, which is known as a supplier table. And in this, we would have these values. Then here also we'll have one supplier ID. Let's give a name to this. This is my product table and this is my supplier table. This is my supplier table. So what we generally do, we connect this to this. And this is known as a foreign key. This one here is known as a foreign key. The supplier ID here is known as a foreign key. And this ID here is the primary key for this table. And this supplier ID here is a primary key for the supplier table. This is how we relate. This is how we write the things in a database. Now, how to implement similar thing with Spring Data JPA? Well, it's very simple. Let's try to implement the simplest possible relationship here. Consider I have a supplier. Let's consider a supplier here is a separate entity. So here I would create one more entity or one more class called supplier. And the supplier probably would be having its ID. So let's give long supplier ID, supplier name, and okay. Let's give something a location, which is simple. Okay, that's fine, right? So we do have these three fields in supplier as well. And since it's an entity, I should annotate with the entity annotation as well as I need the getter setter. For that, I would use the data annotation. And since it's an entity, I should also have a primary key. So I would have a primary key, which is by using ID. So that's fine. Okay. That's cool, right? So I do have the supplier details here. So I want my product should have a supplier. So I would implement the simplest possible relationship, which is a one-to-one relationship. So let's consider for a product, there is exactly one supplier, and for one supplier, there is exactly one product. Later on, we'll update this relationship to a better relationship like one-to-many or many-to-many. But for time being, for the simplicity of this episode, we are going to implement a one-to-one relationship. How do you implement? We just need to create a field of type supplier. I'm just going to write private supplier. That's all. But we are getting an error, right? So it's showing an error. What is the reason behind this error? Because you see the type string or double or int, JPA can understand that there is an equivalent data type. Like for string, we have in varchar, for int or double, we have numeric. But what about this supplier? We don't have any data type called supplier in database. Now we need to say that, hey, this is not a type directly, rather you have to create a relationship. And that's where you need to say at 1-to-1. That's done. I've just added this 1-to-1 relationship. Now what I would do, one more thing you remember, go to your application.yaml file. Whenever you are making any changes to the table structure, better go to your application.yaml file and change the DDL auto to create so that it will create fresh table. Let me relaunch this. Now what will happen, we'll be able to see that. Let's quickly have a look, right, what exactly happened. Look at this. First of all, it has created a table called product. Then it has created a table called supplier. And later on, you see it has added a foreign key constraint on supplier underscore supplier ID and here reference supplier ID. So what do you mean by that? So if I go to my MySQL to see that what exactly happened, I can write DESC products. And look at this, what and all fields we got, right? So price, quantity, ID, product name and description were there previously. And we got a new field called supplier underscore supplier ID. Look at this. And this is a foreign key. This is actually a foreign key and which has a reference to the primary key of supplier table. We can see DESC supplier. And look at this, we got a supplier ID here. We can have more control here rather than writing. We don't want the Spring Data JPA to generate the name. Rather, I want to give my custom name for this field. So I can write one annotation here at join column and I can give a name, and I can give the name like directly supplier underscore ID. That's cool. I'll save this. And if I relaunch this right now, done. Let's have a look here. Right now, if I see the product table, you see the name is supplier ID. That's better rather than having a big name like supplier underscore supplier ID, which is not looking that great. So that's better, supplier underscore ID. So you can customize that as well. Now let's try to save some data. So let's quickly go to my Postman to save some data and let's see what happens. So if I try to save the data, so previous details as it is, we'll keep and we'll add more data to it. Let me make it a little bigger so that you can see it clearly. Okay. So I would add more data to it. How do I add this supplier? Okay. Supplier. So now remember, supplier itself is another entity. So how do you pass this? You have to consider it as an object as a whole. So we would pass it like supplier, and supplier has its ID. Is it ID or supplier ID? We have to cross check. Let's have a look, right? So if you go to the supplier class, it's supplier ID. So we would write supplier ID. Let's give something like 101 and supplier name. I want to give a name, Express Hub, something like that, some random name. And then I have a location. So consider they are located in Bangalore. Cool. So let's try to send this data. Let's send this, and what I'm getting is an error. What is the reason behind this error? Let's try to understand. So let's quickly go to my code and let's see what is the error, right? So what it says that unable to find a model supplier with ID 101. Now let's try to understand why I'm getting this error. You see, whenever we are implementing a relationship, let's try to understand from here, right? So whenever we are implementing a foreign key constraint, what happens? The foreign key, whenever you are inserting the data for the foreign key, the primary key must be present. Remember that whenever you are inserting the data for the foreign key, the primary key must be present. And that means first the supplier should be added, then only you should have a product. As simple as that, right? So you cannot have a product without a supplier. First you should have a supplier, then you should have the product. At a time, we are trying to insert the product and the supplier. If at all you want to do this, there is a concept in database known as cascading. How do you implement cascading in product entity? So what I need to do, I would just go and with respect to my one-to-one, I would add something called cascade. Add a property called cascade. In this cascade, I would write cascade equal type dot all, right? There are different types of cascade, right? So I do have cascade for merging. You would be able to see that we have merge, we have remove. We do have different options, but I'm going to use all. Okay, let's try to relaunch this. And quickly, let's try to add the data once again. So I'll go to the Postman and let's make a request. And yes, I'm getting the data in response. Look at this, that got saved. I can also see the data in my MySQL as well. So if I write select star from products, I'm getting this data. Similarly, if I write select star from supplier, I'll be able to see the supplier details as well. Now I want to find out all the data together. Can we do this? Yes, we can actually write a complex query, a complex join query like this. Select p dot star comma s dot star from product p join supplier s on p dot supplier id equal s dot supplier id, like this. And if I execute this, I would be able to see this, right? So I'm able to see all the data. Let me make it a little smaller so that I can see the complete data. So you see, I'm able to see the complete data here. So I need to write a complex join query to fetch all the data. Now let's see what happens if I make a GET request. Let's quickly go to my Postman. Let's actually make a GET request. Let's quickly go and let's pass the product ID. Let's use a GET request and let's make a GET request and let's quickly have a look, right? So what I'm getting in response, the product along with the supplier details, and let's see what query it has created. So if you look at the queries here, you can see select from product join. It has used something called left join, but doesn't matter what type of join it has used, but you can see that it has used a join similar to what we have done here. So manually we have written the join query here. The same thing, even the Spring Data JPA has done, right? So I don't need to type a lot of complex queries. Spring Data JPA will deal with it. So I hope you understood, right, the concept of how to implement the mapping in Spring Data JPA. There is another type of mapping as well, which is known as a bidirectional mapping. So right now the one that we have implemented is known as unidirectional. So what is a bidirectional mapping? Now in unidirectional one-to-one mapping, the one that we have implemented here my product know about supplier. But if I go to supplier has no information about the product. So from one direction, that is from the product side, if I write a query with respect to the product table, I would be able to find out the supplier as well. But the same thing I cannot get when I fetch the supplier. So from the supplier, I won't be able to fetch the product. If at all I want to achieve this, what I need to do, I need to implement a bidirectional mapping. How do you implement this? So just like my product table or the product entity has an entry for the supplier, similarly my supplier will also have an entry for the product. So all that I need to do is a private product. And of course I need to write a 1-to-1 here, and similarly cascade. Let's go with the cascade. That's all. So that's what we'll do, and let's relaunch this application. Let's see what exactly happens. So the application got relaunched. That's good, fine. And let's try to store the data once again. Let's make a post request by passing the same data. Let's send it. What we are getting in response, everything is fine. But here you see the product is null. And also, let's quickly have a look on our database as well. Let me make it a little bigger. So if I run this select star from products, I can see the information of product, fine. And product has a supplier ID, very good. However, if I see select star from supplier, if I run this, you see the product ID I'm not getting, right? So you see the product ID I'm not getting. How can I update this? Well, in order to update this, because what is happening, you are saving only the product entity, and any changes that you are making to the supplier entity, that is not being stored. You know why? The reason is the supplier is first being stored. At the time of saving the supplier, you didn't have the product inserted in the table, and that's the reason why this is not being stored or this is not being updated. If you want it to be updated, what you need to do, I just need to write a very simple code in my product entity. So I just open my product entity, and here I would write a setter method. So let's write public void set supplier. So I would just write here, this dot supplier is supplier, and if the supplier is not null, then what I'm going to do, this dot supplier dot set product, and I'm going to pass the current product to this. Okay, looks very complex, but it's very simple thing that what I'm doing. So what I'm doing actually, I'm setting the supplier. So I'm going to the supplier, and for the supplier, I'm setting the product to the current product. Okay, so that's what is happening. And if I relaunch this, what will happen right now? Let's have a quick look. We will make the request once again. So, still we are not getting. What is the reason? So what is the reason? I would just check here. So if you look at this, we have done a very silly mistake. It should be not equals null, then only we should set, right? So I would just relaunch, and let's quickly test it again. Let's make this request. Yes, it is being saved, right? But there is a problem as well, right? So you see there is it's keep on going. So why it's happening? Because it's very simple, right? So I'm saving a product that has a supplier, fine. But the supplier has the product. That product has the supplier. So you are going to an infinite JSON nesting, right? So this JSON will keep on going on. You see that, right? So that's what is happening. How do you avoid this? So in order to avoid this, is very simple. Again, I need to use certain annotation. So I would go to my product entity first, and here I'm going to write one annotation. So if I consider my product entity is the owing side of this relationship, so I would write an annotation called JSON manage reference. Fine. And I would go to my supplier class or the supplier entity, and here I would write another annotation at JSON back reference. Done. And I would relaunch this application with these changes, and quickly I would go and test it. Everything is fine. You see, for supplier, only the supplier details I'm getting, the product details is not getting repeated. But in real time, if you want to test here, so earlier the product ID was coming null from supplier. Now if I test it again, look at this, the product ID is being updated here as well, right? So this is how we can actually implement a proper one-to-one bi-directional relationship. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we are going to implement other type of relationship like one-to-many relationship, many-to-one relationship, and many-to-many relationship in our upcoming episodes. Make sure to watch all the videos and do subscribe to my channel, and also share it to your networks and connections as well. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.